Hi, my name is Dan, and this is my 1946 Luscombe 8A.
The Luscombe was an innovative competitor in the general aviation market at its initial 1930s production. In an era of fabric airplanes, it featured an all-metal airframe and enclosed engine cowling. It is considered a true pilot's airplane with impressively responsive flight controls for maneuvering. Today we're talking to Dan about his Luscombe Model 8A.
When I was about 14, my dad took my best friend and I out to the airport. And I had never really been to a small little airport. Nobody in my family had ever flown. And he said, boys, this is my friend Tommy. Tommy's going to take you flying in his airplane. I know now that Tommy had a 1950 Cessna 170. And he took us up there and I sat in the right seat. And we took off and we were bumping along, and I remember thinking it feels like we're in a Volkswagen Beetle up in the air. And we flew all around, and I said, Tommy, how do you get your pilot's license? And he said, I don't know, show up at the airport with about $3,000 and that ought to do it. And I always remembered that. And then I guess it was about 12 years later, I had about $3,000, and it had always stuck in my head. And I showed up at the local airport and said, how do I learn how to fly? And they told me about a flying club, and I joined the flying club and got my license inside of about 3 months. And then a few months after that, I bought this airplane. I had met a couple of older gentlemen who, what they did was they restored airplanes. And so I was introduced to them, and I would show up there in the shop, and they would show me about how kind of airplanes went together. To one of them, Ed, I said, Ed, I think I want to get an old airplane like one of these. And he said, oh, you do? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what are you looking for? And I said, well, I don't know anything about old airplanes. And he rustled around a bunch of papers on his desk, and he pulled out a picture of this Luscombe. And he said, well, this airplane is for sale over at the big airport. And so I went over there and saw the plane and fell in love. The guy took me up, and we flew it around, and it seemed to fly like a dream. And so I borrowed money and bought the plane. This airplane is a 1946 Luscombe 8A. It's a two-seat side-by-side tail dragger. It has a Continental A65-8 engine. It has no electrical system. You have to hand prop it to start it. It cruises at about 100 miles an hour. I have flown it personally in excess of 1,600 hours since then. So it does have a reputation among pilots as being a squirrely airplane, but that's only because it just does whatever you tell it to do. It has a very effective rudder and very good mechanical advantage on the rudder pedals. So if you move the pedals a little bit, you get a lot of rudder deflection. That's good if you intend to move the rudder, but if you're not meaning to, it can result in some wild rides. And it also exhibits a lot of adverse yaw. So if you don't properly coordinate the rudder, it'll roll one way and yaw in the other direction, which takes people by surprise. But if you learn how to harmonize your controls, it just flies like a dream. And I would say it's a true pilot's airplane because it does whatever you want it to do. Don Luscombe originally worked for the Monocoop Aircraft Company in the 30s, and they built tube and fabric radial engined airplanes. And he had a vision that general aviation airplanes, smaller airplanes, could be and should be made out of metal, like the military was building airplanes. Nobody else was doing that at the time. Started building a metal airplane. The first Luscombe was called a Luscombe Phantom, and it was a radial engine, two-seat airplane. But it was very cumbersome to build and very expensive, and they were really difficult to land, and so they wrecked all the time on landings. And so he started the Don Luscombe School of Aeronautics, and the deal was you come here and build airplanes in our airplane factory and learn, how to build airplanes. And he also then got a bunch of free workers. Some of the students sat down and actually, and they saw all the difficulties in building the Phantom, and so they came up with a design that would solve a lot of these, and that turned out to be this Luscombe Model 8. And what they did was, if you notice, the fuselage has a horizontal strip down the middle, and the fuselage shape is an oval. So their idea was you could have a formed metal piece at the top and a formed metal piece at the bottom and a strip along the side, and one person could rivet the skins on and then rivet that in, instead of having to have like a little person to go into the back of the fuselage. You can also tell a Luscombe because it has a notch where the wing meets the fuselage, and that's because they were having a hard time figuring out how to fare the wing into the fuselage, and the students just said, well, why don't we just not? And so there's a notch there. That was all happening in the late 30s, and the first 8A was produced in 1937, so there was no other airplane like it at the time. Us Luscombe people like to say that this is kind of the granddaddy of the modern airplane. So I am a flight instructor with the Texas Flying Club. That's a flying club that's based at the Coulter Field Airport. It was originally the Texas A&M Flying Club. Now it's no longer really affiliated with the university, but I do primary instruction there. It's a great club, and if I have any advanced students that are interested in tailwheel, we can jump in the Luscombe and do that.
Are you ready to go fly?
Sure, yeah.
Since the Luscombe doesn't have an electrical system, Dan walked us through a quick tutorial on hand propping before we got going.
We make sure that the aircraft is secured with the tail tied down and somebody's got their feet on the brakes. And then our throttle is definitely at idle. And then we're gonna give it one good shot of primer once we get some in the pump here. There we go. And our key is there, not in the ignition. And then we're gonna give it enough, probably about 4 blades till we hear a gurgle in the intake. So. And contact, brakes, wheels are chalked.
All right,
can you hear me?
I got you loud and clear.
All right, let's see the radio.
There we go. All right, we should be good.
You ready?
I am ready.
So we got to get our oil temperature up, so we'll kind of have to taxi around a little bit.
Hey, at least it's warmer than it was this morning.
Yeah.
I'm freezing my booty off.
Oh, I bet. Well, turn around out here where it's not so sandy. Looks like runway 17 is the right one. So while we're waiting on the oil pressure or oil temperature to get up to about 100,
Okay.
we'll do a little mag check and make sure everything's working good there. Fuel valve is on. Parking brake is off. We got 1500 RPMs. Our field elevation is 500. Both mags are good. Got a drop on the carb heat. These little Continental engines, this is a Continental A65. It's the same family as the O200. They're susceptible to carb ice because the carburetor sits, the manifold is below the crankcase. So you have to be careful of that on a rainy day or any day when you could have carb icing. Downwind base final, everything's clear.
I love these tail wheels on the ground, the way they just spin around.
Yeah, you can just spin it right around. We got 100 degrees there. We'll do one more quick run up and then make our announcement, and then we'll head up.
Alrighty.
Hilltop traffic, Luscombe 334 is departing runway 17. We'll be maneuvering in the area. Hilltop. We'll hold our brakes. Make sure we get our correct static RPM of 1900. And we got it. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Here we go. So we kind of let the tail come up on its own. Aileron down into the wind. Aileron is what keeps the aircraft centered on the runway. Rudder is what makes it straight. And now we can just lift it off into ground effect.
Wow.
And build some airspeed. You don't want to hurry these things. get your airspeed, get the birds out of the way, and up we go.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. This thing sits up nice and high. It feels like sitting in an SUV.
Yeah.
So you're only, 2,000 RPM on full throttle climb out then.
Right. Yeah. So the 65 horsepower spins lower RPMs. You can see the red line there is 2,300. So in cruise is about 2,250 to 2,300.
Okay, and that gets you said, around 100 miles an hour?
Yep.
That's not too bad, really. I'm assuming most of the flying you do in this is probably low level, just tooling around type of stuff anyhow.
Right, yep.
It's a really nice area to fly around. I like all the trees and forests. You know, we don't have so much of that.
Where are y'all
right
from?
Right up in Dallas, DFW.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the old sandhills, I guess, where the beach used to be a long time ago.
Huh.
So this is cruise here, so you can see we're getting up to 100.
Okay.
And so one of the first things I like to show people is that if you hear about adverse yaw, but you really don't, it's hard to really detect. This plane, it's not hard to detect at all. If we hold the rudder pedals still and don't move them, and we bank the airplane, say, to the right, watch where the nose of the plane goes. See how it just goes in the opposite direction. Yep. So your job as a pilot is to coordinate the rudder and the aileron so that you turn on a point like that. So that's one of the first things that we do when we're doing tailwheel training is we work on this rudder coordination, and we pick a point straight out there and try to pretend like the spinner has got a string tied to a water tank up there. I see a road straight up there, so, and then we rotate the nose back and forth on that point. And if you coordinate your rudder, it doesn't really look like any big deal at all. But if you don't use your rudder,
it starts swinging.
It just goes every which way. So
yeah, it is really obvious in this airplane. It's really easy to see it.
So one of the things I try to teach is that it's just about controlling where the nose goes. So I can use the rudder pedal, and I can draw any shape. If I pretend like there's a pencil sticking out of the nose of the airplane, I can make it so that I can draw a square or let's see if we can do a circle. And when you get where you can do this, then your feet are doing the right thing.
Right.
So when we are landing, what we're trying to do is make it so that the rudder makes the airplane be straight and the aileron keeps it in the middle. And you don't mix those two up. You have to split that up when you get down there. So we practice these rudder skills, and then I find that when we get back to the runway, then the student is able to do the right things to essentially make a correct crosswind landing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you really can't put past the importance that upper air work has on your groundwork.
Exactly.
It really is. You can do so much up here, and you don't have to worry about it, don't have to think about the ground, and you can really learn how those things work to help you out.
So we'll do a little bit of a steep turnaround and clear, make sure nobody's around us. Maybe we'll do some lazy eights. That's one of my favorite things to do in this airplane.
I love a good lazy eight. I'm down for that. I mean, it's a difficult maneuver for a reason, but it makes such a difference in your stick and rudder skills.
So let's see how I do. We got a power line right away right there.
Okay.
All right, so
nose up, max pitch around 45 degrees. Slice that nose through the horizon, the max pitch down about 135. And around 180, we'll come back to where we started. And back the other way. I always think of these like we're essentially drawing a figure eight on the horizon with the nose.
Exactly, yep. If you do it right, the plane almost does it by itself.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying about being super responsive, because we're, you know, up and down. You're really not putting much pressure on the controls at all. You're not moving very much.
You want to try flying it?
Sure, I'll try. I can't reach the rudder.
Yeah.
There we go. I'll scoot you down. I got it.
There you go. All right, you have the plane?
I got the airplane. Yeah, just the slightest little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely a fingertip control airplane. The trim is here, but I normally just leave it trimmed for cruise flight.
Right.
Because it's really hard to adjust down there, and there's so little control forces that I just sort of like to feel it in my hands anyways.
Yeah, it's so light that it's not like you're really, you're not fighting it, because it's so easy to get it to do what you want it to do.
Yep.
This would definitely be a great airplane for learning, to get that death grip off the
Exactly.
yoke.
If I look over and see somebody like that, I'm like, okay,
You're
2 fingers.
over-controlling.
Yep.
Yeah, you really do have to lead those turns with that rudder.
Yep.
Fun.
So I always like to say that the right way to make a turn is if we pick, say, I'll come on the controls here a little bit.
You got controls?
But you see the power plant up there? The little. So when we start our turn, what we want to do is make sure that the nose stays on that point.
Right.
So we'll roll on the point and then neutralize the controls.
Right.
And then when we want the turn to stop, we pick another point and we roll on that point.
Right.
As opposed to you see a lot of times people kind of slogging the nose around.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I really like that for an explanation too. And you know what? That's another big thing too. I always like relating things to looking out there.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, in an airplane like this, it's easy to look outside, but otherwise you get where they're staring inside. They're looking at the heading indicator. I'm like, no,
exactly.
That's not what we're doing yet.
Yep. Well, you want to go back and do some landings?
All right, let's go do some landings.
All right.
That'd be cool, to kind of explain the difference between the two different tail wheel landings.
Right. So in a wheel landing, you're basically flying the airplane onto the runway, and once the wheels touch, you then add a little bit of forward stick to prevent the airplane from bouncing, which puts the wings in a negative angle of attack. And that's a very unnatural thing for a lot of people to figure out to do.
Yes.
But it's critical, because if you don't, then the airplane will start porpoising. But I find wheel landings to be extremely useful, because if it's really gusty, you can pin a wheel down and then kill the lift. The trick is you have to get the tail wheel down. And a 3-point landing is like what most people are used to. You just hold it off until the wings stall and let it settle into the ground.
It feels like a flare, but you're setting them all down at once.
Exactly. Yep. All right, there's the runway there. We'll take a look at the windsock and make sure nothing's changed.
All right. I think it's actually died down a little bit from what it was this morning.
Landing on runway 17 here, you get some really funky winds. They call it the McGilvery's bump, where a rotor forms. It'll just turn you. So you need to land kind of right on the numbers on 17.
Okay.
Hilltop traffic, Luscombe 334. It's one to the west at 1,500 inbound landing 17 Hilltop.
All right, cool. So I guess we'll start with the wheels landing.
Okay. So pretty much beam the touchdown point, we just gently bring the power back to idle. And what we want to do is pretty much just get the airplane down to the short final with a little bit of excess airspeed, and then use a forward slip to bleed it off.
Okay, so you just completely take that power away a beam and...
Yep, and these little airplanes without flaps, that's what you want to do is, if you have to add power, you misjudged a little bit. Hilltop traffic, Luscombe 334, short final 17, touch and go, Hilltop. We'll just slip down.
Oh wow, it comes right on down.
Yep. See what the winds are doing down here. And we'll just put a little bit of power in so we can feel for the runway here. And then we just work the tail down. And then pick it up and hold it in ground effect. These low horsepower airplanes, you really want to just don't hurry it out of ground effect.
Right.
Get your airspeed up, and then once you have airspeed, you can climb out however you need.
Oh, very nice. It definitely does feel, again, I'm tail wheel endorsed, but it's been a minute. It feels unnatural to come down in that flat position, because we're so used to coming down and holding that nose up, holding that nose up.
One of the things that I do for my students when I start is they're usually expressing that they're afraid they're going to hit the propeller.
Yeah.
So I put the prop vertical and have them sit in here, and then I go back there and I pick it up until the prop is like an inch away from the ground, and they're like, put it down, stop, put it down, because the plane looks like it's going to come,
Yeah, that is the thing. These things have the clearance to do that.
Yep. Oh, he's taking off the other direction. I wonder why he's doing that.
Interesting.
Hilltop traffic, Luscombe 334 is right downwind 17. You got the traffic taken off 35.
So if you want to start a fight amongst tailwheel pilots or Luscombe pilots, you say, I think you should only do wheel landings, or I think you should only do 3-point landings. And there's usually camps for each type. And I try to not put myself in either one.
Right.
They're different tools to have in your toolkit to use when necessary.
Absolutely,
So short field, grass runway all day long, 3-point.
Yeah.
You know,
Stick it down.
gusty, you know, long runway, do a wheel landing. You know, use the power to feather it on down.
I fully agree with that. And I think, you know, you should be proficient in both all the time.
Amen. Yep. Try our hand at a 3-point landing.
Smooth 3-point. Awesome. I'd say that's a good one to end on. Well, thanks for sharing it with me. This is an awesome little airplane.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And you're a great instructor, too. You talk through things really well.
Oh, thanks. All right, so we turn the fuel valve off right about here.
Just roll it in as it dies.
Yeah.
Hilltop traffic, Luscombe is clear of the runway at Echo Hilltop.
Quick check on the mags. Make sure, you always want to make sure that definitely cuts it off so that next time when you're hand propping it, you know for sure
it's grounded properly.
It's grounded, right. All right, mags off.
Makes sense.
All right, well, thanks again, Dan, for taking me up and showing off the airplane. It's awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure. I love talking about tailwheel flying, and I love talking about Luscombe, so I really appreciate y'all coming.
It's a great airplane.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave us a like, comment, and hit that subscribe button for more. And if you have an airplane that you want to show off, make sure to send me an email, dakota@flyingdoodles.com. And big thank you to our patrons. They are the ones that make it possible, so make sure to check it out, patreon.com/flyingdoodles.